Hello and welcome to Cemetery Stories Capital Connections Edition, Season 2. I'm your host, Capital Eric, and I'm a tour guide here at Sacramento Historic City Cemetery, as well as the California State Capitol Museum, a unit of California State Parks, just up the road. And I'd like to tell you today about one of our permanent residents here at the City Cemetery, someone who was connected in life or in death with the state capitol. Let's go. Don't be scared.
The duel which took William Ferguson's life started out as a simple misunderstanding. Ferguson, born in Pennsylvania in 1825, had lived in Illinois, where he was an associate of Abraham Lincoln, and Texas before moving to Sacramento. He was once described as being possessed of great ambition, a brilliant genius, one of the most eloquent and fascinating orators California has ever held in citizenship. Elected to the state senate in 1855, Ferguson switched political affiliation from the Know-Nothings to the Democrats and was re-elected to the office twice more. He was also described as being addicted to drink. This newspaper report continued, "In his convivial hours, or days, he was hilarious to a point quite inconsistent with the dignity of the senatorial character, even drunken senatorial dignity." Apparently, in those days, senators were drunk enough in general to establish a baseline of what was considered below the dignity of the average drunken senator. One night in August of 1858, at the Bank Exchange Saloon in San Francisco, this behavior would start him on a path to his destruction. George Penn Johnston, a former assembly member, claimed to overhear Ferguson speaking a slur against the daughter of U.S. Senator William Gwynn, a friend of Johnston. Johnston demanded that Ferguson retract the slur and apologize. Ferguson refused, as he claimed never to have uttered it to begin with. Heated words were exchanged, and Ferguson rushed at Johnston. Johnston drew his pistol, but was prevented from firing by friends surrounding him. After tempers settled down, both men left peaceably, but the next day, Johnston challenged Ferguson to a duel, and Ferguson accepted. The two men, their seconds, several physicians, and a number of spectators met on Angel Island in San Francisco Bay on August 21st. The combatants stood at 10 paces and fired, and missed. The distance was reduced, but did not help the aim of either man. The distance was reduced once more, but to no avail. This should have been the end of it. 3 rounds had been the agreed-upon number, but when Johnston once again demanded an apology and Ferguson refused to give it, a 4th round was scheduled, with the two men standing just 20 feet apart. The scene may have looked something like this from the Broderick-Terry duel in 1859. Both men fired, and Johnston's wrist was grazed. However, Ferguson's right thigh was shattered, and he sank into the arms of his seconds. Johnston was satisfied, and the combatants departed as friends, with Johnston referring to the man he had just tried to kill as Uncle Ferg. Ferguson was transported to San Francisco for treatment, where physicians begged him to allow them to remove his leg. He refused, saying that he would not part with his leg for the whole of California. The wound, as expected, got worse, and when amputation was finally attempted, Ferguson died during the operation. His body lay in state in the Senate chamber in Sacramento, a rare honor, and he was greatly mourned, as you can see by the monument erected over his grave in the state plot of Sacramento Historic City Cemetery by the people of the city. Johnston was tried for murder but acquitted, based on the argument that had Ferguson followed the physician's advice to have his leg amputated immediately, he may well have survived the wound. This defense might well remind you of what Charles Guiteau claimed when he was tried for the murder of President James Garfield. The strategy didn't work so well in Guiteau's case. Oh, and just a little bit of irony. Assemblyman George Penn Johnston, several years before the events that led to the duel, had authored a successful bill to put a stop to the bloody practice of, you guessed it, dueling. And that's not all. Remember the Broderick-Terry duel in 1859 I referred to earlier? The two combatants involved in that duel, U.S. Senator David Broderick, on the left, and former Chief Justice of the California State Supreme Court, David Terry, were once friends and were part of a contingent of lawyers detailed to escort Ferguson's body from San Francisco to Sacramento for burial just 1 year before their fatal meeting.
Well, that's been another episode of Cemetery Stories Capital Connections Edition, Season 2. I'm your host, Capital Eric, and it's been my pleasure telling you a little bit about the cemetery as well as the state capitol. Now, unfortunately, during the pandemic, the California State Capitol Museum, a unit of California State Parks, is closed to the public. However, the cemetery remains open for a solitary stroll or some quiet contemplation. Keep up the social distancing, wash your hands, because it is better to be 6 feet apart than 6 feet under. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.